Welcome back to another Survivor Worldwide episode here on Reality Pop. We've got a great guest here with us today. It is Dr. Harry Wiggins, who played in Survivor South Africa Season 4. Harry, how are you?
I am well, thanks, and I'm extremely humbled, honored, and happy to be here.
Well, we're extremely happy to have you here as well. I didn't think I was going to be able to talk to you this season, but I'm aware of you. I'm aware of you being a player that went out there and played the season of Survivor South Africa because we actually went to the same high school back in the day, back in Worcester Gymnasium. You're a bosvark, just like me. So for those who are not Afrikaans, that's the warthog, basically. And Harry, it's such an honor to speak to you because, I always wanted to follow in your footsteps and be hopefully that second person one day that would represent Woestergym out there in Survivor South Africa. And now I'm just an armchair critic, so much easier to sit on the sidelines and talk about the show. But, I really appreciate the fact that you reached out while listening to one of the shows and sort of picking up on the fact that we're both from the same neck of the woods and that you're willing to talk about Survivor South Africa. Have you been keeping up with the whole season?
Yes, I have. I even went to Jock from season 7, and we've been watching Survivor together, so that's pretty cool. And Chris,
nice.
I'm happy that to be here. Talking Survivor with a fellow Bosvarkie. We went to the same school, Worcester Gymnasium, and I think this is really such a great season, because, this episode, there was a multi-elimination, which I know well. This is such a great episode to unpack because of the tethered twist, and as a numbers nerd, I could share a little bit of Survivor maths with you guys and your audience and your listeners.
Yeah, you're going to be our very own version of Christian Ubicki today here on the podcast, and we're expecting some high things from you. No, don't downplay yourself. I just want to go over to Riley and also welcome Riley back onto the show. Riley, it's been a whole 3 days since the last time we spoke about Australian Survivor. How have you been?
Yeah, I've been doing really well, and I'm still recovering from this last episode. So confusing with this new twist, and I must say I'm a little bit disappointed that Amy got screwed over by that twist there, because I was really rooting for her towards the end. But I mean, I suppose that's the nature of this twist. Destiny's tied, and it ultimately was very chaotic tribal council, and such a great episode to unpack so many things going on, and we're getting ever so close to the finale now, so things are really starting to ramp up.
No, 100%. I mean, the game of Survivor can be very cruel at times, and I really felt for Amy in this episode, becoming a bit of an iconic player, I believe, in Survivor South Africa, being somebody that's voted, and I put that in quotation mark, out of the game without actually receiving a single vote in the game. Harry, what did you think of Amy's game as a whole, and do you think that this will put her up there as one of the more iconic players that potentially will be remembered because of how she left the game?
She's definitely an iconic player, and she's in a unique category, being, eliminated with 0 votes against her name. And just want to come back to what you said, there's a South African musician, Johnny Clegg, and he has this song,
yes.
Cruel, Crazy, Beautiful World. And Survivor has sometimes this cruel part to it. So it is a really a casualty of the twist that Amy got voted out, and she played such a great game. And she was fighting till the very end. I mean, she had conversations with Santini. Santini's headspace weren't in the right space, but She was a fight, and she was in it to win it. And so I really felt sorry for her. And I would put Amy in the same category as poor Sari Fields from season 34 of American Survivor, that because of, the circumstances, the wild circumstances all around you, you got booted out of the game without any votes against you. So, so it is quite traumatizing, having to afterwards, discuss and decompress after an episode like this.
No, 100%. I mean, there's going to be a lot to get into with this episode. And I guess we start here in the early stages with Anesu. And Anesu is someone, I don't know if you're aware of this, Harry, but she was my first female pick on my draft pick for the season, and someone that I had as my preseason winner pick coming into the season. And I feel like she's been doing me proud at this point. She's been playing a pretty good undercover game. She's very aware that the tides are starting to turn against her here early in the episode, and that she needs to start making a move. And we see quite a bit of conversations here early on between Anesu and Chappies. And I feel like this is something, Riley, that I've been talking about quite a lot in this season, is that I've always seen the edits show us those times when Anesu has tried to reach out to Chappies. And I always thought that Chappies-Anesu relationship will become an important one at a later stage in the game. And we even find out here in this episode that she ultimately, is trying to get Chappies to work with her, come over and turn on the other three within the original Vuna alliance, so that they can obviously try and upset that power couple, because Anesu's very aware she's outside of that. And she even tells Chappies at this point, Riley, about her tribal council pass, which is quite interesting. What have you been thinking about, Anesu's game here and that relationship? Because obviously, ultimately, we know they're not going to go. The vote's not going to go the way that Anesu would have liked for it to go here. But do you think there's some legs to this alliance moving forward, and that we could potentially see a very explosive episode next round?
It's really smart of Anesu to start planting those seeds with Chappies. And even though the opportunity didn't come in this episode, because they ultimately would have been left with worse numbers than they would have otherwise if they hadn't gone ahead with Operation Destiny, as they termed it. I think it is really smart for Anesu to find that someone in the game she can trust, because we saw earlier in the game she had that relationship with Karan, Tyson, and Wada. But that time away after the tribe swap really hasn't seen her work her way back into the group. And she's more so been left out of the decision making a lot of the times. So for her to recognize that she's not exactly the highest person on the totem pole right now, and to look at potentially working with someone like Chappies and by extension Santini and the other Zamba members, putting that trust in Chappies and letting him know that she has this power in the game that potentially they can use to take someone out in the future. It really is a smart move by Anesu now to really start playing that game and looking at their path once the numbers start to dwindle and they recognize that they might be on the bottom of the Vuna Alliance and they can do something to get away from that.
No, I agree with that. Anessa, I think, is really a cool player, and she's a smart player. I mean, she went to UCT. I mean, she's trained as a doctor. And I mean, poor Anessa, she's been throughout Vuna, and then the merge happened. And because of the twist, she hasn't had the opportunity to vote as many times. But I wanted to add, I really loved what she did this episode when she revealed to Chappies that she has a tribal council pass. So that is an extra piece of information and power tool that Chappies and Anessa can have moving the way forward. So I'm excited to see how this is going to go.
And listen, another thing about Anesu, I'm not too sure how big of a fan Anesu was before she went out to go and play this season. I'm not too sure. I'm sure, hopefully we don't get to talk to her too soon, but at some point I'll be able to ask her that question to find out, because we do the exit interviews here on Reality Pop as well. But one of the things that impressed me as well with Anesu is she's already thinking that next level with using that tribal council pass, which is, it's not just necessarily for her to use it on herself to leave the tribal council. She's thinking about using it to eliminate someone else's vote so that they can get the upper hand in the numbers to vote the way that they want to vote. And there's not many people that have thought about that advantage in that way. I mean, Luke Toki, an Australian survivor, Riley, did it quite late in the season where he could dictate the votes, but it was a lot later, and he could use it a lot later in the game than what she's able to use it in this season. But I like the fact that she's already thinking that next level when it comes to the strategy here. And what's going to be interesting and what's going to develop throughout the episode, it's more going to be Santoni that seems to be the person, and especially if you've listened to Ponderosa as well, and I don't know if you guys have had the opportunity to look into the Ponderosa videos at all, it does seem like Santoni, sorry, I've got to start getting her name right because I got some grief this week from a fan of Santoni's that I keep pronouncing it wrong. And just for that fan, so that they know, if I was to speak Afrikaans, Santoni would make 100% sense in my head. And I am actually Afrikaans, so I should actually be able to pronounce it 100% correct. But for some other reason, having been abroad for so many years, when I speak English, I start thinking in English, and I kind of translate it to what it would sound like in my mind if it was pronounced in an English way. But Santoni, she's going to be the interesting one here, Harry, this specific episode. And it looks like she doesn't want to be seen or continue to be seen as a flip-flopper, because it does look like that original Zamba, they've put a lot of pressure on her for being that person that is flip-flop back and forth. And similar to her OG Vuna tribe, they've put a lot of pressure on her as well. So I feel like Santoni is trying to find her feet here, and she's trying to actually stick with an alliance for a bit longer. I don't know if it's going to work in her favor, but would you agree that Santoni is probably the person here that prevented this plan from going ahead?
I don't know if she prevented it, but I think Santoni made a pivotal decision, for this round to stick strong with Vuna. And I really feel sorry for Santini. She's pure TV gold, and I would love to meet her one day. But it's, as you said, it's extremely tough, getting pressures from the original Vunas and the original Zamba. So you're like sitting in the middle and being pulled in all kind of the different directions, and even that conversation she had with Amy, after the immunity challenge, it's really, really tough. So my heart goes out to Santini, the decisions that she has to make, in the position that she's in, because, I mean, you can't think too far ahead, and also she's got this really close relationship with Chappies. So I'm pretty sure we're not seeing all of the conversations that Santini and Chappies is having, for example, and I'm sure, all of that is being used in her equation, to help her to make a decision, so we're only seeing a little bit of TV time, and so, as I said, it's so hard to read people, are they bluffing, are they not bluffing, I mean, what is Santini going to do? And I think Santini wanted to show by sticking Vuna strong in this vote that she is not a fish that flip-flops in every direction the wind blows. So a little bit of credit to Santini, for showing
100%.
that she can be her own person.
No, listen, I'm not coming for Santini. She's got a lot of fans that would be angry at me if I did do that in any case. But I've enjoyed Santini this whole season. I think that her gameplay has been, it's been TV gold. I mean, she's playing the way that a lot of people would love to play the middle, jump in between different alliances and vote one person out in this alliance, then jump back and vote a person out in the other alliance. And so far, everything that she is doing, you're thinking to yourself in your big Survivor superfan brain, there's no reason that it should be working for her as long as it's worked for her, but it continues to work for her up until this point. And dare I say, she could still be a crazy winner at the end of the season. But I do think that she's going to potentially start running into some trouble because of the perception that is out there that she's a flip-flopper and that they can't trust her vote. And her conversation with Amy, which we'll get in a little bit later on, I don't think is too great for her when Amy is going to that jury now, and she's going to have quite a lot of time to talk to the rest of the jury members. And we do know that that's potentially going to have a massive effect on who they're going to want to vote for when it gets to the end game. I also want to say hello to Jenny here in the chat. Jenny is a consistent listener of ours for the Australian content and also for Survivor South Africa. Jenny, it's nice to have you back here on the live feeds. She's asking you, Harry, she hasn't seen your season yet, and she's asking if your season is worth watching and if you could tease your season a little bit without spoiling it for her.
Okay, so a teaser for South African Survivor Season 4, all right? So the first teaser, it is in the Maldives, which is stunning. The second teaser, I'm getting tongue twisted here. It also has it is celebs versus plebs. A third teaser would be there's a multiple elimination like today's episode. And what else can I say? And what I really liked about our season is that we also had a twist that was taken from a non-English speaking survivor. So I want to give kudos to this Leroux, Henry, and the production team, because sometimes they take ideas from non-English speaking survivors. So for example, in our season, they had a twist of a black and white cowrie coming from a twist from a Philippine survivor where they had a black and white pill. And as you know, in this season, the episode was titled Thai Destinies. You can also call it a tethered twist, which is another tongue twister, or the Koh-Lanta twist, which is a twist that was used a lot of times in the French survivors. So it is definitely worth watching. So please, Jenny, if you can get hold of it, please watch it.
Yeah, no, 100%. And we've got the right person here on the job as well for you. Jenny, you're probably not aware, but Dr. Harry is a professor at the university somewhere in Johannesburg. You correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not across all of the universities.
Pretoria, okay. University of Pretoria.
Yeah, shows you how long I've been outside of South Africa. I look at Pretoria as Johannesburg as being the same thing. I'm probably going to have a lot of South Africans coming at me.
It's a mega city.
Exactly, a mega city over there. So Dr. Harry is kind of like the South African version of Christian Ubicki, I would say, in regards to math. And you're the right person to have on the show here today because we get this pairs twist, right? what's the chances of things turning out in such a way that the actual alliance members that are divided currently end up being together? Because we get Amy and Rhaenyra together, we get Nicole and Anila together. That's 2 out of the potential 5 pairs that are aligned with each other already. And then we get Tyson and Warda, Kiran and Anesu, and Santuni and Chappies together as well in pairs. And for me, I love the idea of this twist. I thought, man, oh man, this is going to be cool because it could just completely shake up the game from that power alliance, the power alliance of 6. They may need to eat one of their own because of how this twist could turn out. But we end up here with the pairs not really changing anything. What's the likelihood of something like this happening, Harry? How unlucky were Rhaenyra and Amy really here?
All right, very good question. So I'm going to answer that question in a moment. So give your listeners a chance to do the calculation if I haven't done the calculation. But first, I want to answer the following question. So as you know, the twist started with 10 players and you had 10 rocks, so 5 colors, so 2 colors per rock. So you had, and yes. So they had to randomly draw a rock. So the question that you can ask, as a person interested in maths, you can ask how many possible outcomes, possibilities, permutations, different universes could there be, with such a setup. And I did the calculation and it was co-signed by Jock. And so we ended up getting 945 different possible outcomes. And so we ended up with this outcome where Anessa and Kieran's together, Chappies and Santoni's together, Tyson and Warda's together, Tyson and Warda already said together, Nicole and Anela together, Amy and Rhaenyra together. All right. Now, the next question, Santoni also asked this question in the episode, Riley. Do you remember Santoni asking this question? So
I don't actually know.
Santoni actually asked this question in the episode. I watched it for a second time yesterday, and so I hope you've been doing your Survivor homework. So I actually did this calculation. So when I did this calculation, so what is the chances of all the alliance members ending up in the same twosome? So all the Vunas being in 3 twosomes and all the Zambas being in 2 twosomes. And the calculation that we got was 1/21, which is roughly 4.8%. So it is extremely unlikely for poor Amy and Rhaenyra, because statistically, what should have happened, the most likely outcome, and I did the calculation here, should have been a Vuna pair and another Vuna pair, and then a Vuna Zamba pair, another Vuna Zamba pair, and the last one would be a double Zamba pair. So that should have happened 4 out of 7 times, which is 57% of the time. But we ended up in this universe, where all the Vunas were together and all the Zambas were together, which is 1/21, which is a 4.8% chance. So the Survivor gods, as I said, can sometimes be cruel.
Yes, please send that calculation through to me after the podcast. I want to keep that so that I can have a conversation with Leru Buta about this at the end of the season as well, because I'm pretty sure that he must have been, and him and the production team as a whole must have been devastated when this is what happened, because in their minds, they would have wanted things to shake up a little bit here and for different possibilities to actually come out in the game. Riley, we get into this, you're a big fan. You've watched all of the seasons as well, similar to myself, you go play this game. I actually asked Rhaenyra this question when I did the exit interview with him yesterday. That will be on our channel tomorrow about the same time as this live at the moment. Is there a way that you can prepare for this? Would you have seen this coming if you were playing the game? And in your mind, how much did this mess up the gameplay for play? I think more so for a player like Amy specifically, because I don't think she was on anybody's radar this early on in the game.
Yeah, well, I'd even say Rhaenyra was screwed up by that plan as well. And we'll talk about the reward challenge later, and Nicole's choice to bring Amy and Rhaenyra with her, which was just a stupid decision in my mind. But it is crazy to see this time in the first time this twist has appeared in an English-speaking season. So I'm not sure they would have really expected it all this much. A great twist, though, to borrow that from Koh-Lanta and bring that over to Survivor South Africa. And something to hopefully see in future Survivor seasons, whether that be South Africa or Australia or the US, because it really did add another dynamic. And we were robbed of that relationship between Wada and Smash being on a tied destiny together. I really wish we saw that happen and saw a little bit more of those dysfunctional pairs that could have sprung up 5 out of 7 times, as Harry said there.
Santini and Anella.
Santini and Anella, yeah. Anyone with Anella, anyone from the Vuna tribe with Anella would have been great TV to see. But unfortunately, we did wind up with it just being a straight 3 pairs of Vuna and 2 pairs of Zumba. And really the two, each pair was really the closest from each tribe, really. So it was crazy to see how that checked out. But yeah, really just a crazy twist. But it did add for some fun dynamics to see what would happen. I just wish we had a little bit more of that Zumba Vuna dynamic to see what is the best option. Do I eliminate one of my own alliance members just to get rid of a stronger member on the other alliance? And where do we really go there? So unfortunately, we didn't see that dynamic, but it still turned out to be a great episode.
No, 100%. Teresa, welcome to the stream. Teresa was in this current season as well. Very closely aligned with Renee early in the game. And I did see that she tweeted out that she was pretty devastated to lose Renee at this stage in the game. And I can also say, Teresa, that in that exit interview tomorrow that's going to come out with Renee, he does talk about how much he thinks it affected his game losing you that early in the game, because he did feel like he had a pretty good thing going with you and a pretty strong alliance as well. So, you know, this whole thing really sets the plan back for players like Anesu and for players like Chappies who were just planning on making this massive move. And, you know, they have to start thinking a bit more cautiously about the numbers now, because not only are they getting rid of one of the OG Vunas if they were to vote, but they find out that their destinies are going to be paired all the way through until tribal council. So if one person gets voted out, the person attached to them is going to be voted out at the same time as well. And it's times like these where I feel like sometimes the producers, and we see this a lot in international seasons, when they throw a twist into the game, it kind of messes with the natural progression of what would have happened in a game regardless. And I actually think that, you know, in hindsight, with, you know, when you look at 2020 vision here, it probably would have been better not to have this twist. Even though I love the twist, even though I think it's really creative, and I understand that the chances of this specific iteration of it happening, you mentioned, was 4.8%, which is ridiculous. You know, it ended up blowing up in the producer's face, and they can't go ahead with this plan that they're starting to put in motion. So overall, really, really sad to see, but it does make for some interesting things moving forward into the episode. Harry, what did you think of seeing the double confessionals with 2 people at the same time? I really enjoyed seeing the different people talking to us at the same time. I've never seen that in a show outside of The Amazing Race, or maybe The Challenge, where they're in pairs and they do the double confessionals. I thought it was a pretty cool touch.
I loved it. It's unique. I loved it, you know, having 2 people together and confessing, you know. I mean, it is really beautiful. You know, I'm also in 2 minds about this twist, you know. I love it and I hate it at the same time, you know. I mean, it's cool, but unfortunately the way it shaped out was not so great, you know. And I would have actually loved this to be like a 2-hour episode where they would have had like a reward challenge in this pair, these 2 sims, and then an immunity challenge in these 2 sims. It would have been great. You know, we would have just seen a lot more of the interaction between these 2 sims, and also how these 5 little pairs of 2 sims interact with one another. But I have to say, you know, seeing 2 people confessing and sharing their ideas with one another. But as I said, you know, it would have been a bit more spicier and more interesting if there were a little bit of mixed 2 sims.
Yes, and I think that this episode again here, Riley, shows why the show is not rigged. You know, like people like to say, oh, Survivor's rigged. You know, they make certain players go further in the game and want them to win. If the show was rigged, I feel like Rhaenyra was one of the biggest characters for this season. And he was, at some point, we thought, probably one of the producers' favorites, because he's so good at articulating himself in those confessionals and sort of running the whole show, you know, that at the end of the day, you know, he ends up being screwed by this twist. And also they remove the ability for Nicole and Anella to send someone to Immunity Island, because they know that that would take another 2 people out of the equation, which effectively would have meant there's only 3 potential pairings that can go home at Tribal Council. If the show was really rigged, you know, Riley, surely they would have kept Immunity Island in the game at this stage.
Yeah, and as Harry pointed out there, we really were robbed of a great character on this season. Renier all along has been such a great character to see, from that blindsided Jason all the way through. He's been so entertaining, such a brilliant mind of the game as well, and he's really downplayed his threat level, but unfortunately just all caught up to him in this instance. So really screwed over there. And that reward challenge decision by Nicole to bring Amy and Renier on the award with her, leave in 6 Vuna members back at camp. Really, the mind boggles as to what she was thinking at that stage. It was quite bizarre to see that play out and leave 4 Zumbas all on their own without the ability to actually work on the Vunas back at camp.
I want to underline what Riley said. Renier, you could see he's a super fan, but he's a kind of super fan where I made the mistake. He underplayed his cleverness, and the way that Renier interacted with his fellow players. And Renier even realized that it was a fatal flaw for all of the Vunas to go to the reward challenge, to the water park, and leaving all of the Zambas all by themselves to speak open and freely and to plot and scheme and work their way forward. So I want to underline what Riley said. It is extremely unfortunate, and I've played the game before, so it's definitely not rigged. And sad things happen.
Yes, I mean, Renier, I asked him quite a few interesting questions in the interview. I think it's an interview that would be worth listening to, and I'm hoping to have Renier back at some point to do a proper deep dive, because I only had about 30 minutes or so to talk to him, and he's such a smart, clever guy. He understands this game very, very well. I felt like for probably 70% of the game, he was in charge, and he was dominating. Like you just said, the fact that he could underplay how well he knew the game, to the point that, Dino came onto the exit interview, and Dino is a very smart guy as well. Dino had absolutely no idea that Renier was a big fan of the show. Amy, I spoke to her on her exit interview. She told me she had no idea, even to the point where she got voted out, that Renier was that big of a super fan of the show. So that speaks volumes, because there's so many players who want to go out there and play the game. And I think probably for myself, the biggest thing that I've learned through watching the show, especially in recent times, and seeing massive fans go out there and sort of go out in flames, I've learned that, you really, really need to downplay that threat level, your knowledge of the show. Obviously, if I was ever to get on now, I couldn't do that because people would know that I'm on a podcast about it. But, it's just one of those things where if you have the luxury where you can downplay that level of knowledge of the game, do it, because Dino got voted out based on that. And then the one conversation that really stood out for me and really showed that level of understanding that Renier has for the game was that conversation with Chappies, where he said to Chappies that I thought the physical game was everything. I didn't really think that the social game, and that was just perfect. And again, getting him to sign the trust book, it's just very interesting gameplay by Renier. I'm gutted for him. I do hope and I do believe that there will be another All-Star or there will be a first All-Star season for Survivor South Africa, hopefully in the next 2 seasons. Season 10 would be the perfect time to do it. And I do hope that we get to see a player like Renier play the game again. Probably more so, Riley, I would want to see Amy come back, because I felt like, even though Renier was a great player, we all know that, I felt like this specific episode, even when they get back from the reward, let's be honest, Renier played a good game, but I felt like Amy was the one who was really putting up the fight, and it looked like she had a lot more social capital and different things that she could do to try and stay in the game. I was really impressed by Amy this season, and I do feel like her going out this way, she deserves another shot at this as well.
Yeah, and with Amy, especially on that new Zamba tribe, she was really the one that was flip-flopping between that alliance between Chappies and Santini and Carla and Wada all throughout that pre-merge, really dictating the vote. So I think she's played a very good job at sitting in the middle and sort of sitting between both sides without being too close to either side. She had that closer relationship with Sean, obviously, and she lost her close ally in the last episode. This time, she stumbles over herself and ultimately is snuffed out of the game, which was really sad to see. But she was very aware of her position within the tribe. She had those relationships with Anesu, Santini, Chappies to a lesser extent, but mainly those 2 girls, and she had the ability to branch out and strategize with them. We saw a lot between Amy and Anesu sort of strategizing and realizing when was the right time to strike. But yeah, I think unfortunately for Amy, Anesu and Chappies, they just didn't have the numbers to to strike, because if they struck against Vuna this episode, they would have been left 4-4, 4 Zamba, 4 Vuna in the next episode, which really would have screwed them over. And they probably would have been, the people in the middle that are targeted for that reason, because they can't be trusted either way. But yeah, I think really unlucky, not only for Amy to be voted out in this pair twist without getting votes against her, but also for her being for this pair twist existing, because I think otherwise it would have been a great opportunity for Vuna to get rid of, namely Chappies and Anesu, to get rid of some of those former Vuna members without completely losing their numbers at the next tribal council.
Now, I do want to touch on the reward. They go to the water park, which is amazing. We always used to have Godini close to us there in Worcester for the water park that we used to go for fun. But, there's this really funny scene that I just had to laugh at, which is the slow motion shower scene with the craziest music on there. It's very rare to see this type of reward challenge in a season of Survivor, because normally they don't actually get to go to a big park like this. I don't think they've got the infrastructure around the islands that they normally play in. Harry, what did you think of the reward as a whole? And, obviously we spoke quite a bit about Nicole not being a fan and potentially taking the wrong people out there to go and do it. And then more importantly, what did you think about Tyson afterwards trying to make sure that they can't come back and find an idol and thinking those couple of steps ahead?
Oh, goodness. So many questions. First of all, as a player, I won't mind winning no rewards and just like winning immunity every time, So as a player, I would rather want immunity instead of rewards. But it was quite unique though, obviously, because they had the luxury of being close to a water park. But if you're in a desolated island, so this is quite, again, a first for South African Survivor. So yes, it was kind of cool seeing them enjoying this. But as I said, I would have preferred this being like a reward challenge done and dusted, and then an immunity challenge done and dusted, because then these pairs would have been forced to work with one another over multiple days, over multiple challenges. But the other question about Tyson, I thought
just
it was really
thought, and I'll remind you of the Tyson question so you don't forget and don't lose your train of thought. But this just came up as you were talking, and I was thinking to myself, should Renier have offered to give up his spot in the reward, like we've seen in so many other Survivor seasons before? Would the move have been to say, hey, Nicole, I really appreciate that, but I would love to give up my spot in this reward if I can, and I want to give it to Santini because she's felt on the outs for the last couple of days or something? Do you think that would have been the move here, or do you think that's something that, because Nico to me seems like someone that lets things play out. He doesn't really interfere as much with the flow of the game. Do you think that would have been the move here?
Excellent idea, Chris. I actually had that was my first idea, because when Renier started talking, you could see there was a little bit of hesitation in his voice. I was also thinking that, and I was thinking that Renier would be brave to actually ask Nico, can I give up my position or our group's position for another like Santini and Chappies to go. So I like that idea. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. It would have been great to see that Renier tried that and see how Nico would have responded to that. But that would have been my idea on how to try to handle that position that Renier was in at that point of time.
Yeah, in my opinion, deflect as much as you can.
Deflect as much as possible.
Yeah, and I mean, and Renier's a super fan, so I'm sure these things would have gone through his head. I sadly didn't ask him that question in the interview. I wish I thought about that before the exit interview, but hopefully he seemed open to come back on the show. I'll be able to ask him that in the future. And one of the things here is that he's not someone that's shy when it comes to trying to take an advantage in the game, because if I think about the fact when they found that hidden immunity idol clue, he openly asked, is it selfish of me to ask to keep it? So I wonder if it was the fact that Nico's kind of like the headmaster and you're a little bit more afraid to ask Nico directly for something. But I do think Nico is very flexible around letting things play out. And I do think that he probably could have bargained or something could have happened there in that case. But I do want to go back to the question I asked you before I sort of rudely interrupted you in your train of thought. Tyson, having the foresight here to go out and go look for an idol, because he said, maybe there's an opportunity for them to find a clue here on the reward, and they might come back and find that idol, and that's the last thing that we need, because if they have an idol and then the other tribe is immune, again, it's only 3 options there for them potentially, and they would have to cannibalize 2 of their own members. What have you thought about Tyson's game so far this season, and how impressed have you been with the way that he's worked in that duo with Karan?
All right, so if you excuse me, I'm going to go off on a tangent because, as a first year lecturer, you do tangent lines. So as you know, in this episode, there was no immunity island at all. So that wasn't done at all, and I think the reason why that happened is because imagine there were an immunity island in play in this episode. So one team, one immunity. They sent another team to the island so they stay in place, so they get immunity. And then they find the clue to the idol and they gave it to another team. Then they end up getting immunity. And then Anessa plays a tribal council pass. And then one team remains and they get eliminated without any votes. So I'm pretty sure this is why there were no immunity island in activation for this episode. And obviously they know there's a clue to an idol on the island. And so this is why Kieran and Tyson, I believe both Kieran and Tyson, they went looking because I think everybody suspects that there's an idol somewhere near the camp. So they went hunting for the idol, and so they ended up getting eggs instead. Well, the idol would have been better than eggs, But I think Kieran and Tyson is quite a pair of powerful players. And as a strategic consultant, I have to say I like the way that Kieran also thinks, So for now I want to clump Kieran and Tyson together because I think they are working very well together, and I think they both had the smarts to know, all right, there's an idol lurking somewhere. And this could have been dangerous because what if Renier and Amy somehow stumbles upon that idol and they had a real idol in their hands, and then I would have liked to know who would they have targeted, would they have targeted, Tyson and Warda or Chappies and so I would be thinking probably Tyson and Warda. But Kieran has won immunity twice. Twice as well. And that's already targeting like a big bullseye on Kieran's back as well.
Yeah. For me, it's been interesting, the edit this season, Harry. I'm someone who reads quite a bit into the edit. I know Riley doesn't like to dabble with the edit too much and, sometimes gets annoyed with me because I really read into the smallest things. But with Kiran, we haven't really seen his sort of process of thinking through things until quite recently. I felt like throughout most of the early parts of the season, a lot of the focus of the edit has been on Tyson, even though we know that Kiran is someone that is clearly a very smart player. And, to me, that kind of makes me wonder if Kiran is someone that's going to get blindsided here in the near future if they can't get Tyson. And Tyson is ultimately going to be the player that's going to get a little bit further because Tyson's getting a lot of the, he's getting a lot of the credit for a lot of those moves that happened earlier in the show based on how the show has been edited for me up until this point. Not that I'm saying that Tyson isn't someone that's playing a really good game. I've been super impressed by him this season, and myself and Riley had him right at the bottom. I think he was the second last guy pick this season. Anella being the other person, by the way, Riley, shows you how little we knew.
And Santini and Wider were the last female picks as well. So we got our last 4 picks in the draft are all in the final 8 now. So it's just crazy how things are going. But I think to hop on that Kiran and Tyson relationship, they almost remind me of JT and Steven from Survivor Token Chains. Two people that have worked really, really closely. I think Kiran's probably the one with the more social capital in the game. But then again, I think he's also won individual immunity so many times, so that's starting to put a massive target on his back. Whereas on the other hand, Tyson, I think, has that weaker connection with the likes of Enesu, and obviously Santini is not popular with Tyson and vice versa as well. But he's played those idols. So I think if there were to be in a final 2, I'd probably give the credit to Tyson just because of his strategic play. Although I mainly think his moves have been more flashy, whereas Kiran has probably been the brains behind the operation. But Tyson's really been the one that's been showing off. So it would be interesting if those two go to the final tribal council together. It'd be a really interesting dynamic because I think if either of them land at final tribal council, I think one of them wins. If they land together, I think Tyson probably has the better resume at this point, just because he's been so flashy and forward with his moves.
Flashy, yes.
How many votes do you reckon Warda gets, Riley?
Well, Smash isn't voting for her, that's for sure.
Amy also not after this
I
episode.
don't think Warda. I don't think Wada is held in much high esteem at all. And it really depends on who goes to Final Tribal Council together. Santini and Wada would be a fascinating Final Tribal combination. I think mainly because I think Santini has it. Yeah, even though she's pissed off a lot of people on the jury, I think Wada just doesn't have that claim to the game because she's sort of been that third number. I hate saying this word in Survivor, but she's almost been that goat in that alliance between Tyson and Karan, not in sense of the greatest of all time, but more so in the goat that's been dragged along to the end there. I do think for Wada, if she is to become a major player in this game, she probably has to look to Anesu and reviving that alliance, recognizing that Tyson and Karan are such a tight pair and they can't really be broken up at this stage. So I think Wada needs to take responsibility for her own game, sort of try and alleviate the relationship there with Anella there, and try and work with Zumba to get out Kiran and Tyson and break up this power couple.
So and I think Santini has sorry, Chris. But I wanted to say, if Santini makes the final, I mean, she has a lot of ammunition that she can defend herself. She played a crazy game. She played an unusual game. She helped Tyson getting idols. She was like spreading information to and fro. She had conversations with nearly everybody that played the game. So some credit should go to Santini. Even though she didn't plays the game that everybody else is playing or wants her to play. But she's being her own person. So I mean, if she is as well spoken as Renier and a lot of the other players are in this season, I think she could defend herself if she makes the final.
I think Santini is sort of playing that Sandra-like game, that anyone but me game, but a little bit more aggressive, which has sort of ticked off some people like Marisha, Renier and Sean have been a little bit abrasive towards her, not as respondent, because she is playing a little bit with people's lives and they're starting to recognize that. Whereas with Sandra, she was a little bit more passive in the game and let things flow around her. Whereas I think with Santini, she's more direct in that everyone knows that she's the deciding vote and the swings with her. So I think if she gets to Final Tribal Council, certainly if she owns her game, she's got a great opportunity. I think she's played a fantastic game so far. I think the downside with her is she's pissed a lot of people off at this point, that it might not be viewed as in such a high esteem with some other members of the jury like Sean.
100%. Now, Santini, for me, great game, really explosive to watch. I think that she comes back for an all-star season, she's dead in the water. No one's going to trust her. No one's going to want to play with her. I really think unless she can come in and reinvent herself and potentially fool people like Tony did in Winners at War, people are going to look at her and say she's too dangerous to play with because she's unpredictable. But I want to go back to Warda. You mentioned there that Warda should go back to Anesu, and it brought something in my mind. It brought something up. Anesu is someone at this point in the game that's not being trusted by people that she was very close with early in the game. Like, you look at Kiran and her have got this relationship from outside of the game. They both know each other from uni or they know of each other. Warda and her had this connection in regards to yoga. She seemed to be pretty close to Tyson in the beginning of the game, and somewhere down the line, that relationship has soured. I've got my theory on this. Obviously, I can't prove it yet until I actually speak to people when they come into the exit interview. But what I think potentially is happening here is that people are looking at Anesu as a jury threat. And I think that's why they don't want to take her into that final three. So that's why I don't think it's a good opportunity for Warda to go back to Anesu at this stage, because you've got to remember that Anesu played with the Zumbas for the longest period of time, for the original Zumbas. She was always seen as a potential vote for them, and she was the double agent who voted with them early in the game, which really annoyed Santoni because Santoni didn't get to keep that cover. They were really annoyed by Santoni flip-flopping, but Anesu has always stayed clear of any of that sort of hurt feelings that old original Zumba sort of brought up. So I feel like Anesu is better liked by people on the other side. And somewhere down the line, you've got to think to yourself, there's probably going to be more Zumba members at some point on the jury than actually Vuna. So I do think she's a threat if she gets to the end of the game. And it's why I still am not willing to count Anesu out as a potential winner. For me at this stage, I'm looking at two potential players that probably will win this game. And it's Tyson, probably at number one if the status quo remains, and Anesu. Those are the two people that I think is the best placed. I don't want, Santoni could be that person, or Santoni, I keep saying Santoni, but Santoni could be that person that is staring us right in the face, and she could be a very obvious winner that we didn't see the whole season. But I think that there's a lot of things that she needs to get by to get there. And then Chappies has had the most confusing edit for me this season. What do you think, Harry, at the moment? What do you believe the lay of the land is? And do you agree with some of those assessments, or what's your own predictions in regards to what you're seeing playing out in front of your eyes?
Oh, you're throwing all these difficult questions at me. Remember, I'm a podcast virgin. I'm not Nostradamus, so I can't predict the future. All right, but I'm happy with the decision that Anesu and Chappies and Santini made this episode. But I think the three of them should team up and somehow work with what's remained from Zamba, Nicole, and Anela, and the five of them work together, and they should get rid of Tyson. They should get rid of Kieran. They should get rid of Warda. And then if they get rid of them, then what they have is now back to that five-sim. Then they should get rid of Anela, and then they should get rid of Nicole. And then what remains is Anessa, Kieran, and Chappies. And depending if it's a final 2 or 3, season 7 had a final 3, so that would be my prediction for the final 3. But if it's a final 2, it could be that the final 2 is between Anesso and Santini, maybe. I am just stabbing a random guess in the dark. I don't know anything, and I do not want to know spoilers for future episodes, but this is where my head is at the moment.
Now,
Anesso, Santini, and Chappies for the final 3. This is where I'm guessing. Really? Yes.
Wow, okay. Bold call, and I love that. I love the bold calls because normally I'm the one that do all the bold calls. I don't know if I can put the final 3 together yet as of now, but I can see that there's definitely a possibility with those 3 working very closely together, thinking about. But the problem is going to be next episode, where does Anela go? And that's why I'm bringing this question up. Brinification, who is also one of our consistent listeners on the podcast, welcome back to the stream, says here that Anela told Tyson Kiran Warda that Rhaenyra does not have an idol, because obviously at the end he tries to fake the fact that he's got an idol, but Anela already went to them earlier to say that it's not there. And Anela, I do give him credit here, seeing the end of the road with Rhaenyra and trying to build some relationships here with Tyson and Kiran. But I think towards the end of that, the most interesting thing was that he realized that he was going to be number 4, because they made it pretty obvious that they are 3 strong, that are going to go to the end. So I'm hoping that Anela is smart enough to jump on the train here with Nesu, Chappies, Santini, and hopefully Nicole, and go and cannibalize that Tyson, Warda, Kiran alliance. Those 3 need to be broken up. If they're not broken up, they're the final 3. They're the most obvious final 3 that we can see at this stage. But Anela is another player that probably was very lucky to get away from this episode, because if he didn't get immunity by proxy, he probably would have been the next person on the chopping block at this stage. Riley, talk us through anything else here that happened prior to Tribal Council. What have I missed?
Yeah, well, I think what you mentioned there with Anela then approaching Santini, Anesu, and Chappies about being the man at the bottom and sort of breeding that distrust with the former Vuna members in Kiran, Tyson, and Warda, and saying, well, if they're offering me a Final 4 deal, then maybe you aren't as close with them as you may have thought. So I think that's going to be a really key thing to look at in the next episode, is what's going to happen with this Vuna 3, being Kiran, Tyson, and Warda, and the rest of the Vuna members, Santini, Chappies, and Anesu. Is the time right for them to strike on Operation Destiny, with Zamba now being down to 2 members, Nicole and Smash? Is the time right now? And I'm going to be really interested to see if that Tribal Council pass comes into play in the next episode. And I do kind of want to smash this out now with the numbers, man, that we got him. We've seen in Australian Survivor that Luke Toki played the same sort of advantage at the Final 4 and took one of the members away so they couldn't vote. And I do wonder if Anesu can use that, as opposed to assuring herself of immunity, maybe take out a wild card factor like a Santini, send Santini back to camp, which then gives you 4 numbers in the 2 former Zumba members plus Chappies and herself, to then blindside one of the other 3. So I'm thinking that could be an opportunity for Santini to be removed from Tribal Council, which removes this element of a wild card factor and someone that can go either way. And I think that's probably going to be the right move for Anesu to make, to then break up that threesome of Kiran, Tyson, and Warda.
But I mean, if they're smart, they would clue Santini in this plan, and I'm sure she would love this plan, and I mean, use as an extra vote and use that as extra leverage, to get rid of Kieran or Tyson, or Warda. I'm pretty sure that Santini would be on for that plan. She won't say no to that plan. So and because Santini and Chappies has such a good relationship, because remember, Chappie saved Santini when she was nearly drowning in that river or that stream of water.
Yep.
And so I mean, Chappies can come back and say, I'm calling in a favor now. I saved your life. Now it's time to save my life. So, if they play smart, they can still work with Santini, and get rid of pretty much anyone that Santini, Chappies, and Anessa. This is why I am saying that the three of them, if they play their cards well, they can go pretty deep, into the final three. That's what I'm predicting, and I'm staying with it for now.
And I like that. I like that prediction. I think it'll be a pretty cool final three as well. One of the things I'm interested in, based on, obviously we don't know what's going to happen in the rest of the game, and there's still a bit of gameplay left. Who do you think at this point would have the strongest resume going into a final three between Santini, Chappies, and also Anesu? And more so importantly, who do you think the jury will respect as well? Because on the TV, it may have been Santini looks like she's got the strongest resume based on some of the moves she's been able to pull. But how would the jury perceive a final three of those three going into it?
Me or Riley?
You, Harry, I'm putting you again here on the hot seat. I know you're trying to dodge this question. See, this is a form. This is how we know he's a decent survival player, because he's deflecting.
No, I've learned. Playing the game is like you need to learn to deflect a little bit more. So it really depends. So this is why when you play Survivor, you need to start trying to see how does the people think, and what do they value. Some people value challenge players, some people value social players. Do you know how many kids I have, the name of my dog, etc., etc., etc. So I'm suspecting that Anessa's got the most social capital in this game, and so she'll get a lot of jury votes if she ends up in the final. But I'm also think that if Chappies ends up going for an immunity run towards the end of the show, he will also gain a lot of respect in the way he played the game thus far. Even though, remember, we don't see everything that is happening on the island. We see a little snippet, and this is why I wish the episodes were like 2 hours long, so we could see a little bit more of what's happening, or more secret scenes, especially some of those strategic conversations that the players are having, to see where are their minds. I mean, this is such an incredible cast, and I won't mind if season 9 is a redo, the same cast, maybe a different location and then a couple of different twists, them replaying this game and see what different outcome we're going to have. But I feel that for me, and if Santini owns the game at the end, it could really be a toss-up between all of them. But if I have to stab a guess, like Amy doing like some random statistics, I would say Anessa, I would put at a 50% chance of winning the game, and then Chappies at 30%, and then Santini at 20%, because that is my final three at this very moment.
Yeah, I think in that hypothetical, you'd have 6 members from the former Zamba tribe on the jury there, and then the remainder would be, correct me if my maths is incorrect, 4 former Vuna members. No, three former Vuna members, I think it is. So in that instance, I think Chappies would have a strong case at the jury if he plays up that sort of family aspect, sort of like an Adam Klein. We saw that relationship build with Renier, but obviously neither of them said what was going on back at home. But I think Chappies could probably pull off that sort of Jeremy Collins angle and use that to his advantage. And Nessie probably has the respect of the former Zamba members, I would say, with the exception of Renier, who I think really values Chappie's game. Obviously, Santini is never going to get Sean's vote at the end of the day, I don't think. I think in that instance, it might even be split between the former Vuna members voting for Chappies and potentially the rest of Zamba minus Renier voting towards what's her name? Anesu. So I think it would be a really tight final three, and I think Santini will probably end up, despite me thinking she's probably played the best game in my opinion, of those three. I think she's just pissed a lot of people off and sort of, I don't want to compare her to Russell Hantz, but she hasn't exactly handled her social relationships too well, just by flip-flopping so much, and people haven't been able to trust her. I do think it'd be a really interesting final three to look at, because Anesu and Chappies, in my mind, are very split in terms of who the jury might vote for in the end.
It's an interesting thing with Santini, because I wouldn't compare her to Russell Hanson. I know you didn't either. It might be Aubrey maybe is a little bit better, because Aubrey wasn't completely abrasive to people out there. But I think that a lot of this goes to also how people have treated Santini at certain times, because she's always felt like she's never in the inner layer of any alliance. So because she's never felt comfortable, she needed to jump around. And I think if she could explain that in a good way at Final Tribal Council, she could still win people over, where she could say, like, listen, I didn't want to play this game. This is not the game I came to play on Survivor. I was forced to play this game because no one actually took me in. The only person who took me in was Chappies, and Chappies didn't have any social capital for most of the game. He wasn't really leading a big alliance or anything like that. So I needed to do what I needed to do. But one of the things that I'm very interested in is when you look at somebody like a Chappies, he was the biggest target coming into the merge. He's been forgotten now for quite a while. They have not looked at Chappies. Even when you look at Tyson, Warda, and Kiran talking about the picking order, they talk about the fact that Anesu is kind of on the outs. She's not as close anymore. They talk about the fact that Santini is next. You don't hear Chappies' name at all at this stage. It seems like Chappies found a way to build himself up a little bit in the picking order with that alliance. And he is such a dangerous player to keep in the game, because we know physically he's going to get some immunity wins at some point. The immunities that came up until this point has been not in his wheelhouse. He's had to be on a pole, for ages, which doesn't suit men in general. It's just not. It's built for people that have got a bit more of a thinner physique. It's basic physics, being on those little poles with the little holes to put your feet into, and then this specific immunity, being one where they had to balance something. Again, it's like a willpower balance type of thing. But what happens when the immunities suddenly become more physical? Because we haven't seen a lot of physical ones. Physical endurance, maybe of lifting and keeping something up. Or what happens if the next immunity is potentially a swimming challenge? We know he's Aquaman, So there's certain things that hasn't come up yet that he could start winning. And like you quite rightfully said, Harry, he could win his way to the end, which could still gain him a lot of favor with players such as Renier, who wants to see someone really make a run at it here at the end. But I don't know if you guys watch Ponderosa at all, but I highly recommend go and watch Ponderosa, because there's a clear insight there that Kiran and Tyson, it's theirs to lose at the moment. All of the jury members are saying these two are playing by far the best game. Then there's daylight before they start talking about anybody else. So that's why both of them are so dangerous. I think if they were to make it to a final. Now, let's talk about that move there from Renier at the Tribal Council, because I definitely want to touch on that as well. He tries to bluff and he tries to play an idol. He's a big fan. He should expect that someone's going to call him on that bluff. Santini calls him on the bluff immediately and says, I want to see it. And then he pulls and says, no, listen, I don't need to show you anything. But he really tries to strong arm Riley here, Kiran, to the point where he actually annoys Kiran at the end, because he gives it to him and then takes it back and says, do you want to gamble with your life? Obviously, he was trying to do something here, but what did you think of the move overall? And was there a better way that this could have been played? Obviously, now that we're sitting here comfortable in our own household, we're not out there, malnutritioned, cold and wet, and have to think about it on the spot. What did you think of the move, and what other alternatives could he have had coming into this Tribal Council?
Yeah, well, I think the move was more so just to scramble Kiran, Tyson, and Wider's minds as to what they really thought. And in the end, we saw that with the votes, the way they played out, Anesu, Chappies, and Santini weren't with them at all. So it probably was just a last-ditch effort to try and create some shenanigans at Tribal Council, try and create a live tribal. To me, it felt more like theatrics than actual a gameplay strategy. It felt like more going out with a bang, trying to create something. But it didn't seem like there was too much substance there. Obviously, saying to Kiran, I've got an idol, I'm going to use it, I'm going to vote out Chappies. And then planting those seeds of distrust, potentially with Chappies. I know he didn't believe it and he called BS on it. But I think the key thing there is Smash at the beginning of the episode told those three that Renier did not have an idol at all, so it really didn't play out too much. In my mind, it was probably more theatrics than any actual gameplay strategy.
No, I agree. I mean, Anela told everybody that there's no idol. So, I mean,
Yep.
so Renier was trying to bluff. I think Teresa also tried to bluff, and, trying with, playing word gambits with these players. I mean, these players are savvy. It's like Santini was saying, show me the idol, show me the idol. And like Renier asking Kiran, do you want to play poker with your survivor life? So it was. I enjoyed watching it. Would have been epic if he got away with it, but unfortunately, these players are very clued up, and if he had an idol, then he probably. I mean, what I would have done, my lips would have been sealed, and I would have played the idol if I was Renier, and it would have saved me, and I would have saved Amy, and then we could have had our pickings who we wanted to go home. No need for theatrics or trying to, as Riley said, creating white noise and trying to screw their minds and hopefully making them change their minds, because then there was no need for that. But because of the sheer fact that he pulled all of these theatrics and trying to be an actor, at Tribal Council, nobody fell for it, and unfortunately his plan didn't work. Honestly, I don't know what I would have done if I was in Renier's shoes, Chris. I mean, that is such a tough position to be in, because believe
100%.
me, Tribal Council is the last place on the planet that you want to be if you play Survivor. But if you are there, you pretty much have to have your ducks in a row, before people start getting questions fired from you from Nico, or you have to vote, And as I said,
Yes.
it's really difficult. I don't know what the Renier should have done in that position. I honestly, I wish I had the answer, but Renier tried something, and this is what I love about this cast, they're in it to win it, I mean, if you look at Kian, when she was voted out, I mean, she spilled the rice and she was like picking up every single rice kernel, I mean, it's like when you play a game and you make a mistake, you try to correct your mistake and try to make a plan to stay in the game, so I mean, credit must go to Renier, for trying something, and
No,
hoping
100%.
that they would mess up somebody's plan or like somebody would fall for it. But this is a savvy cast.
Listen, I'm not coming for Renier on this move at all. I think he's a great player. I think he tried something there at the end. I think he's definitely up there. I want to see how the season plays out, because Riley's got a very strict rule of we're only allowed to pick four players for each season going into our all-star cast when we do that. So I might not have to. I'll see it in you. I might pick you. I might not pick you at this stage. Or I might try and twist Riley's arm so we can go 5 players from a season. We'll see what happens.
That was more so guided off the general rule in US Survivor is 4 players from any one season. But certainly, I think if we do see a Survivor South Africa All-Stars season, I think they're probably looking more towards season 6 onwards. More so because I think it's just 2 different eras of the show. Almost like when you look at Australian Survivor, how prior to the 2016 season, it's just seen as a completely different show. I certainly do hope that while I haven't seen the original 5 seasons, I do hope that there are some sort of old school players from those original 5 seasons, maybe even yourself, Harry. I mean, even though you didn't last too long in the game, you may be a chance there as a Christian Hubicki sort of pick, a wild numbers man. But I certainly think this cast has been very strong. They've been playing the game from day one. When we saw Jason come out of the gates and completely train wreck his way out of the season, he was playing such a big game, and he ultimately just screwed himself over by talking so much and trying to protect Sean. Every single player, I think, with the exception of a couple who just didn't get a big edit, and I think people like Chorizo and Kihan, they just didn't get the alliances on their right side, so they couldn't play those big games, even though they're massive super fans and they came in with the biggest intentions. Dino as well, another member that was really screwed over by not building those alliances. But everyone from day one has been playing a massive game, and still to this point, there's been so many strong players. I think anyone in this final 8 has a chance to win. There's certainly stronger chances to win, like Tyson and Inesio, as we've discussed. But yeah, it's just been such a great season to enjoy, and seeing all these players play such a high level of gameplay has just been a joy to see.
How you know it's a good season is the fact that every single player that we lose, it's painful. every single
Yeah.
week because they're all good players. You're all shouting for all of them. Okay, so I do want to go over to our draft picks and those that are still in the game currently. We are looking at myself losing 2 players here. I'm going to lose my second female pick from the beginning of the season. And I believe Renier was my 4th male pick when we started. He was sort of mid-pack for me when I first started. And we're going to actually, for the first time, Riley, and I feel like probably almost 2 months, it's at least been a month and a half, we're going to be equal because I had such an advantage coming into this merge. But I tell you what, I am really nervous going into this final stretch because if we were to do power rankings right now, I do think Tyson is the number 1 bet to win this show at this stage for me. I would put Inesu potentially at 2nd on the power rankings. I think this next episode is going to tell us who's going to win the show between those two. Because exactly, my money is on it splitting, and also then based on where that goes. Because when I'm looking at your team up there, I really think Tyson is your only hope at this stage. I know you say anybody can win it. I don't think anybody else there has got winner edit equity for me in the way that the show's been, and I'd be happy to be wrong. Listen, we were wrong about having Tyson as our second last male pick, and we were wrong about having Warda as our last and Santoni as our last, and even Anella, you've got to give him respect for how far he's gotten in the game. And Anella does have a pretty good mind for the game. Like, I mean, we haven't spoken about him too much this episode, but there's a lot of good things that he's done throughout this game, and I do think he's a great player. So I do think power rankings, off the top of my head, if I had to pick a top 3 right now and who I think could win this, I'm going to go Tyson 1. I'm going to go Inesu 2. And I am going to go here on a limb, and I'm going to say Chappies is number 3. For the first time, I'm a massive Chappies fan, Harry. Massive Chappies fan. I didn't want to jinx him the whole season and put him in the top 3. But I actually think they've started forgetting about Chappies, and it's starting to get late
under
season.
the radar.
I think it's a problem. And I do think he's built, like you've said, some relationships. He's got a pregnant wife at home. Renier's got a pregnant wife at home. Both of them have not spoken about that. Does that come back in the final tribal council? Does that hit a nerve with Renier? It's something that they bonded on. And I do think, I continue to think, why has he had such a big edit? Because he hasn't made the biggest moves. He hasn't had an alliance that have wanted to work with him throughout the whole game. Yes, he's a massively big character. Yes, he's great in confessionals. Yes, he finds spy shacks. Yes, he tries
like Tony. Yes,
exactly. And it's great to watch. Like, I mean, Chappies for me is a shoe-in to be back for an All-Star season in the future. I would riot if he's not in that All-Star season. But that'll be my top 3 at this stage. Riley, who's your top 3 at the moment? Who's your power rankings? I think we'll change the format to start talking about power rankings going here into the latter part of the season.
Yeah, mine are basically the same. Tyson 1, Inesu 2, and my 3rd is actually going to be Santoni, just because I think she's played such a strong game to this point, and if she can really own her game at Final Tribal Council, she does have a good chance. It's just a matter of her trying to smooth over her relationship with the likes of Sean and those former Zumba members to see how bitter the jury is towards her is going to be really interesting. I think Tyson's played a great game so far, and I know he recognizes I haven't been his biggest fan since that Dino blindside, but I do really like his gameplay in this season. I do worry for him though. I think that Inesu, Chappies, and Santoni, if they really come against this Vuna 3, being Tyson, Kiran, and Wada, is he potentially the one that goes? I toss and turn between Kiran and Tyson, who is seen as the bigger threat.
Yes, and I also want to add with that Kiran is at that level as well. We're not putting him in the top 3, but man, do we have a bunch of good players still in the game. And I think Kiran could potentially be the best player in the game still. The only reason I'm not putting him in my top 3 is because I just don't feel like the editors told me that he's going to win the show. That's really the only reason.
I think that Kiran is viewed as the bigger threat of the two at the moment, even though, as we said before, Kiran and Tyson are really on equal footing. They both made great moves in the game. Kiran being more the social player and Tyson being the more strategic player. Tyson's really shown his cards, whereas Kiran has sort of been sitting behind. But by winning all those immunity challenges, people view that as a threat. So I think Kiran might be the first one to be caught out there. If he loses this next immunity challenge, I reckon he's gone at this stage. But yeah, Inesu's Tribal Council pass still in play, so there's still so many variables. I'm not sure if Immunity Island will come into play from this point on. Maybe one last hurrah for Immunity Island, just because it's getting so late toward because it's getting so late toward the end of the game. I think we got
There's still
an idol still in play on Immunity Island.
Yeah.
So I'm predicting next episode might be the last time we see
The
Immunity
last
Island.
one.
But yeah, it's coming towards the end of the game now where people like Wada and Smash, they really need to start playing their own games and try and make these big moves if they want to have a case at the end. But I think, yeah, it really is between Tyson, Inesu, and Santini, as I said, at the moment.
Harry, we're going to come over to you to close us off on your power rankings. Who do you think is number 1, 2, and 3 currently for you who are left in the game?
All right. So after this conversation, I'm still sticking with my trio, but I'm going with the assumption there's a final 3. And third place, I'm unfortunately going to give to Santini because there's going to be too many Zamba members on the jury. Second place, I'm going to give to Anesso. She's well connected. But first place, I'm going to give to Chappies because, seeing his confessionals, he will definitely own his game. He will definitely, it will be so amazing to hear his final deliberation to the speech. That's the word I'm looking for. It's been a long week of marking and stuff. So his final speech to the jury members. And I'm pretty sure he will even be able to sway some people that thought, no, I'm not going to vote for Chappies. And then he does his little speech and boom, he gets an extra vote and he ends up winning season 8. So Chappies is my number 1 choice for winning this season. But I have to say, prior to the game starting, my number 1 choice was Dino, and it was for me the saddest.
It was mine too. It was mine too. He was my first pick in the draft, so I was really sad to go. But I do just want to say, Chris, our last 2 female picks and our last 2 male picks are still standing at this point. So I think it goes to show just how little we went into this season, knowing about the game. And people like Tyson, who in his preseason content says he was just there for the experience. He wants to play a nice game. He's really played a massive game. He has been brutal with his idle plays. So he's playing a great strategic game. And I don't think we saw these last 4 on the screen. I don't think we were expecting them to play as big a game as they really did. So it's just great to see that everyone in this season, all 20 players, have come out and played a very hard game. And at this point, as we said, there were 4 players that appeared in our final 3s there. Inesu appearing in all of our final 3s. Then Chris and I picking Tyson, Chris and Harry picking Chappies, and then Harry and I picking Santini. So there really are a lot of strong players, and it does show that we're really split across the board as to who may win this game. And I think it is the case. So many people playing strong games at this point that it's anyone's game.
Riley,
such an exciting season.
I have to say, I like Kieran's quote that he made Nicole think that he's just here for a good time, not for a long time. So,
exactly.
I mean,
so many people don't understand the level.
Quotes. Yes.
Yeah. And for me, it's amazing to see how many people, because he's getting flack for it. Like online, people are like, why is this guy playing like this? I'm like, can you guys not read between the lines that he's underplaying his threat level? Yeah. To me, it's just amazing.
Underplayed his threat level by going naked and do a Richard Hatch in the ocean.
Yeah, or saving his whole tribe and doing like half of the the swimming challenge for his tribe. Underplaying his threat level that way. That's why if Chappies wins this game, it is going to be the most insane win that we've ever seen on a Survivor South Africa season. Like, I mean, it's going to be up there with like we've had a pretty insane win without spoiling it for season 6 as well. But, specifically looking at this season, like it will be a pretty crazy one. And I've kind of compared him a couple of times to the Tony Vlachos level of crazy play. I don't think he is Tony Vlachos level of gameplay. No ways.
Different.
But he's
apples oranges.
Yeah, exactly, because you can't compare anyone to the best of all time. But in my mind, in any case, the best of all time, he proved it more than once. So don't at me. But at the end of it, exactly twice and against the best. So, but there's similarities in this game. Just the craziness, the out there-ness, and Riley. New people that are going to want to play the show, do they need to start watching the crazy players like your Luke Tokis, your David Gannats, your Chappies, your Tony? Do they need to go and start studying these players? Because for many years, the players that were revered were your Yules, were your people like your Parvati's, the players that played more of a cerebral, behind-the-scenes type of game. Is Survivor globally changing at the moment that with all these twists and all the crazy stuff that happens, it takes a bit more of a crazy player that's not afraid to make some moves to actually win the show these days?
Yeah, well, the game is certainly changing all the time, and you got to anticipate these twists, like Twist Destinies or Immunity Island. There's so many different things that might play a factor in the game at the end of the day. That as the version of Harry in the US, Christian Hubicki has said in his Ponderosa on David vs Goliath, he said the thing that makes Survivor so great is variance. Every season, you don't know what you're going to expect. You get different castaways, you get different twists, different relationships, different dynamics. So I think that's the key thing with Survivor. Every season has a different winner. Everyone likes a different type of player. Everyone plays a different type of game. So there's so many things you've got to consider in the game. And it may well be that this era is going to be the era of your big players like your Tonys and your Chappies. You never quite know. But there's so many different ways to win the game that perhaps the Chappies sort of angle is a legitimate way to win the game. We've seen it happen with Tony twice. So why can't it happen again? We'll just have to wait and see how it plays out.
100%. Harry, it's been great having you on the show today. What do you have coming up next on your side? What are you doing currently? Do you have, I don't know if you've even got social. I try to tweet out to let people know that you're going to be on the show today, and I couldn't find you on Twitter. Is there any social channels that you currently have that people can follow you on? Or are you sort of too busy with what you're doing? I'm sure being a professor, or lecturer, it's pretty busy in your day-to-day life in any case.
Chris, so yes, I'm not a media shark. So if people want to get in contact with me, they have to come to the University of Pretoria and study mathematics. Just kidding. Apply to the University of Pretoria and study mathematics. Just kidding. If people want to get hold of me, I think the best way is to hunt me down on Facebook. We can talk about, maths. The mass crisis we have in the world, or if they want to talk about Survivor, or if they maybe want to get into Scrabble and play tournaments, or even play with me online Scrabble. But yeah, so I would suggest for your audience listeners, contact me on Facebook, and we will take it from there.
Are you still into chess at the moment? Do you still play a bit of chess?
No, I used to play chess at high school, but when I got to university, whilst I was doing my master's degree, I got into playing Scrabble, so I love Scrabble, like the comedy mom says, it's like school in a box, because there's maths and there's language, so being a numbers nerd and a word wizard, I love Scrabble. This is why I'm saying, if there are any Scrabble addicts out there that want to play Scrabble with me, please contact me, get in touch with me. I would love to play Scrabble with you. So I am taking my Scrabble quite seriously. I'm playing in tournaments, and I was quite fortunate in 2019 to represent South Africa in the Scrabble World Championships in India. So, as a cerebral type of person that, you have this competitive drive in you, and you want to unleash this, Scrabble shark in you. So I'm doing this by playing Scrabble tournaments. I prefer playing face-to-face, but because of COVID, as you know, Survivor's being shot in our own backyard. The same with Australian Survivor. So, but I love playing Scrabble. I love it. It's such a great game, and I can play it till the day I die. Like Survivor, you probably want to play it or get onto the show before 50, because after 50, it really is a young man's game, because in Survivor you got to read people quite well. I mean, you got to have some level of physicality. You can't be too sucky at challenges, because you're going to get voted off. And you've got to have an adaptability quotient. So it's a lot of things that goes into it. But just what you were talking to Riley, I definitely agree with Riley. We are now in a new school of Survivor. The game has aged, and there's such an evolution. So if you want to play Survivor successfully now, you really have to have an element of luck, but you got to enjoy the game and try to roll with the punches. And I like that quote from Yowman, who played season 14, that says, love all, trust few, and do wrong to none. So that is an important motto to have when you go into Survivor.
100%. Now, Harry, I'm pretty sure Leroux will listen to it. Actually, again, Leroux, if you're listening to this and you got to this point, thank you very much for the buffs that you sent to myself and Riley. Riley's one will be in the mail to him over in Sydney pretty soon. It's been great having you support the podcast this year and allowing for us to have these excellent interviews with people as well as they get voted out of the game. And he will be listening to this. So, Harry, if he came knocking and asked you to play in an all-star season, I know it changes day to day and there's always things that happen in your day-to-day life that you need to check in. But, on a percentage scale, how ready are you to go out there again and represent your season in an all-star season?
My bag's already packed. If they phone me, I can play Survivor like in an hour's time. So I love. I if you cut me, I bleed Survivor. So I mean, it's easy to get people to replace me. In my day-to-day Monday to Friday job. So I would love to play Survivor and undo all the millions of blunders that I've made and redeem myself. So yes, I am probably 1,000% ready to play this game again.
No, 100%. And how old were you when you played the first time? You would have been pretty young back then.
Oh, I think I was
Tricky
27.
question.
27. I
Yeah.
can't remember. It was like many moons ago. And
Yes.
on paper, I probably looked like I was book smart. I mean, I had a university degree. And I've watched the show. But street smarts. Afraid not. And then the twist gets thrown at you, so your adaptability quotient has got to be good. And sometimes you just have to roll with the punches. But I love this game. As Renier said, and I think in his exit interview, another component that I love about this game is besides the challenges, you get to meet people you won't necessarily meet, and this is why also now back to being an armchair critic. I mean, Dino, a livescape game owner, and Santoni, which is the online shop owner. It's people in a cross section of South Africa which you probably never would have met. And now you get stranded on an island. And it's absolutely amazing. I mean, how diverse and interesting people are out there. And
have you come across Martinez yet? Have you come across Martinez yet?
Afraid not. I'm not a suit kind of person. Person. I like wearing casual clothes, and the nice thing about at university we don't really have a dress code, so I don't have to go to class with a suit and tie. So so I've not met Martinez yet, but if he's out there, hunt me down on Facebook.
Yeah, listen, that's been the great thing about doing this podcast this year as well. This is our first year doing the podcast. We've met some incredible people, like all of the Survivor players we've reached out to. They've been so nice to deal with. So it's been pretty cool in meeting all of these different people within the community. Riley, what do you have coming up on Snuffed at the moment on YouTube, your channel, your alternative channel, because this is your channel as well. But on your alternative channel, what do you have coming up?
Yeah, well, I'm probably on here more times a week than my actual runtime in video, because I'm on here for 3 hours a week. It's ridiculous at this point, but so much international Survivor to unpack. But if you're more into US Survivor, obviously on my channel, we're still running through the Journey to Soul Survivor for all winners, season 1 through 40. Bob Crowley from Survivor Gabon, he'll be up next. I believe he's still the oldest ever winner in US Survivor to win the game. So it'll be really, really fun to unpack his game over on my channel, Snuffed, right here on YouTube.
100%. So guys, if you got to this point of the video, be sure to subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet to the channel. We're starting to get closer and closer to 1,000 subscribers. And when we hit 1,000 subscribers, we do have a special that we want to bring with a US Survivor, a Survivor South Africa player, alum, and also with an Australian Survivor. We want to bring them all onto the same podcast as captains to get their hypothetical teams together that they would want to go to war with if there was ever to be an international crossover season in the future, which is something that us fans really would like to have. It's been great having the live audience here who've asked some great questions. We keep seeing familiar names like Chris and Jenny and, Brinification popping up. We really appreciate you guys checking out all of our content. Myself and Riley will be back this Wednesday with Baden Gilbert to talk about Australian Survivor week 4, I believe it is over there. It's keeps confusing me, but it's been a great season. So we'll be back to talk about that on Wednesday next week. And then look out for the exit interviews with Renee and Amy. That should be dropping in about 24 hours from now. And Harry, hopefully we've got a good end to the day with the Springboks finishing the series off against the British and Irish Lions. Let's go the Boks.
Indeed. Yeah.
All right. It's been great talking to you guys.